Hey everybody, welcome to True Crime Freaks, my new podcast. I want to tell you about the different ways you can support this podcast. One is you can go to my other podcast, Lights Camera Pro, where I interview TV and film professionals about their careers. And I also do movie reviews and TV show reviews. You can check out one of my online courses. I've got an Adobe Premiere Basics course and a Secrets of How to Start a Podcast course. Those are at thinkific.com. Just search them when you go there. We also have a merch store. Just search the podcast at teespring.com and check out our hoodies, t-shirts, and mugs. I also have a children's book called Feldman Runs Away, which is on amazon.com. You can always support the podcast by going to Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen, subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast does have graphic content. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks, everybody. What is it like to have a serial killer on the loose in your community? How does your behavior change? Do you buy a gun, mace, get a large dog? Our guest, Jennifer Parker, tells me today what it was like to live during the time when the Baton Rouge serial killers were active in the early 2000s. Hey everybody, I'm really excited today. I have a guest. It's Jennifer Parker. She is telling us what it was like to be in Baton Rouge in the early 2000s when the Baton Rouge serial killers were on the loose. So we talk about what it was like before the killers, during the killer spree, and then after the killers left. It's a very interesting conversation. I hope you stick around for it. Here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to the True Crime Freaks podcast. My name is Sean Ventura. I'm here with Jennifer Parker, who lived during a time of several serial killers. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi.
And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about these Baton Rouge serial killers that were out at the same time. And Jennifer has made this incredible timeline that we'll talk about. And we're just going to see what it's like to live during the time of a serial killer. Not only one, but two or three, which I find incredibly interesting. We're going to talk about some other stuff about the serial killer. So welcome everybody. Here we go. So Jennifer, I'm going to start with my first question, which is, what was it like in Baton Rouge before you first heard of a serial killer being on the loose? Like, what was life like?
So Baton Rouge is pretty small. I always call it a big college town. For people who don't know, it's where Louisiana State University is. People kind of gravitate toward football and baseball there. Growing up, like my mom knew everybody else's mom. The schools, were pretty, I would say pretty small, 300, 400 students in some of the, elementary and middle schools. My graduating class had 300 students in it. So compared to other cities, it's probably pretty small. Everybody kind of knew everybody, and generations stayed there, right? Pretty quiet. Pretty normal. I don't know if people really have an idea of Louisiana, but it's not what movies and TV make of like the swamp Louisiana. It's very much like middle class, regular neighborhoods, and America. It's just very quiet. So,
Right.
yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
so I grew up in Massachusetts, and similar thing. It was I went to a high school that had 3 towns going to the high school, West Newbury, Merrimack, and Groveland. And I think my graduating class was 500 people. And there was a lot of small houses, ranch house. There were farms, like there were cows and horses like in people's yards and stuff. So it was small town, very like the town center, the town square had in West Newbury had like one pizza place, and it had like a gas station and maybe like a realtor and a lawyer or something like that. And that was it for the whole town. So very small town. So you aren't, I guess the question is, are you feeling any danger before these serial killers? Like you're just feeling like you can leave your doors open like we did in Massachusetts. You can leave your car keys in your car. You can just walk around your house and everything's safe all the time? Or was there some sense of danger in Baton Rouge?
I mean, not necessarily. It's definitely bigger than, the one street light and, the one, grocery store kind of town. There was definitely areas that you shouldn't go.
Mm-hmm.
And the quote unquote wrong side of the tracks. I was bused to my high school, which was in a not great part of the town. And we knew, the dangerous parts of town and the safe parts of town, but you locked your door, you made sure you were safe. It wasn't small enough to where people just kind of threw caution to the wind. There was crime for sure. But there wasn't fear, from my recollection. There wasn't fear of, being out in the world. I remember working at the mall. And, having to get off at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and my mom saying, don't leave and walk to your car by yourself, kind of those kinds of things. Right. But that was just general. Yeah. I don't think it would have mattered what city I lived in. So yeah, I mean, we made sure we were safe, but there wasn't, fear everywhere.
Right. So you are in college. I think you told me just recently that it was after college that you first heard of the first serial killing, or it was actually just a murder that you heard of, right?
Yeah. So everybody, went to LSU football games and hung around LSU. It was, if you wanted to see live shows, there were lots of bars around LSU. It was just kind of part of the town that there was a lot to do.
Right. Like Athens in Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're not in school, you're around. You're going to the games, you're tailgating. So around the time that I was doing all of that was when the first murder occurred, but it wasn't necessarily a serial murder. It was, hey, this girl was murdered in her house. I don't even remember which one I heard about first.
Right.
But it was, this girl was murdered in her house near LSU. And it was kind of, oh gosh, okay, that's kind of scary, because I would drive there by myself at night, drive through LSU at night by myself. I was not very worried about getting into trouble. I guess I thought I was tough. I don't know, but yeah. Right. So it was one though, right? So it's one. One is not a big deal.
So let's go back to, you heard about the first murder, and then what happened next? When does the second murder come in Baton Rouge in your area, and you're like, oh shit, this is a serial killer on the loose?
Looking at the timeline, it was probably in that 2002 area. when Derek Todd Lee started to get really, really active, and women around LSU started to go missing and then found.
But you had heard of someone else before then, or no?
There were other. So here's what.
There were other murders, but they weren't connected.
There were other murders, but they were Black women.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nobody was connecting them as like a serial.
Nobody was connecting them as a serial killer. And they were older women. So that's the other thing. It's like, Catherine Hall, Hardy Schmidt, Joyce Williams, they were all older than me. So I didn't put it together. Like,
right.
And Gina Wilson Green was 39, but she was in Stanford Avenue, so that's what really hit it. Stanford Avenue is right by LSU. I had to pass there every time I drove to LSU.
So Jennifer, you've heard of some murders, you've heard of some women being murdered, and there's no real connection that there's a serial killer yet. And then in 2001, Gina Wilson Green, 39, is strangled on September 23rd, and that's very close to you, and that's the first time you realized there was a serial killer, or after that?
Not necessarily a serial killer, but that something is, it's something that I am aware of because she was on Stanford Avenue, and that's right by LSU, and I have to pass that way every time I go to the field house where we would tailgate. So that's when I started to think, this is okay. I got to be careful, So that's when you start to pay attention to your surroundings a little bit more. And you worry a little bit more because it's just one though. Right.
Right. So, but how old were you? Yeah. Were you in your early 20s?
Yeah, I was probably 24, 25. I was 25 in 2001.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So let me see. So you're 25. And at this point in your life, had you ever heard of a serial killer? And have you ever heard of someone who does multiple killings? Or was that not something you were aware of?
Absolutely. 100%. Okay. I was very aware of serial killers and true crime, and very much not as into it as I am now, but absolutely had heard of all kinds of different things, and knew that if one turns into three, turns into more, we've got a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So at what point, you're going tailgating with your friends to LSU games, at what point do you and your friends say, okay, we should never be alone, we should carry pepper spray, we should carry mace? Like, at what point are you like, okay, there's a guy out here and he's killing women, we have to watch out and we have to protect ourselves? When does that happen?
I think we realized it the same time the rest of the city realized it. And that was when the police started to connect the DNA.
Okay.
Which was in 2002. They had started to collect DNA from all of the victims and didn't say anything out loud. I don't remember which victim it was, but for a couple of victims, they would announce that, someone was killed, but they didn't say we connected these victims to one man until probably the third or fourth victim. And that's when the pandemonium started, and everybody was buying guns and mace and alarms and dogs. And so that's when we did too. So I distinctly remember my mom and my mom was in her, late 50s, 50s. We both went and got mace and went in the backyard to test it, to spray it, to make sure it worked. I distinctly remember that because all these victims were different ages. So if I'm 25,
so it could be anybody.
yeah, she's 50 something. It could be me, it could be her. So,
Wow.
yeah, so we realized at the same time that everybody else did.
So that's really interesting that that is very interesting that you're both testing out the mace in the backyard. It's almost like you're
Yeah,
going out there to shoot guns.
almost. My mom wasn't a big fan of guns.
Yeah.
So, and we actually got into an argument because she was the kind of person who would open the door to anyone.
Right.
And I told her, it's your door. You don't have to open it to anybody that you don't know. And she finally stopped doing that. But yeah. So.
Okay. So I'm sorry I keep harping on this, but I'm really interested. Like, how does your behavior change? What are you thinking when you go to bed at night? What are you thinking when you go to school? Are you still going to football games? Or are you just like, I'm going to stick around my house? Or how did your behavior change?
Yeah, I don't know if we were just stubborn or we just believed that nothing would happen. It was scary. Like, it's in the back of your mind, but you keep doing what you need to do. Like, I kept going to work. We kept going to football games because most of the people we were going to football games with were guys.
Right.
There were three of us girls that were hanging out with like 30 guys. So we were pretty safe when we were tailgating. But it's those times when you're in your car alone, or in the house alone, that it really kind of creeps up on you, and you go check the lock on the door, or make sure your car doors are locked, or when you're walking to your car alone, you're kind of looking around 3 or 4 times and making sure your mace is in your hand.
Yeah.
But when you're around a lot of people, it doesn't really occur to you because you feel safe. When I'm at work, I was working in an office. I was actually working for the same company I work for now. But it didn't mean anything when you were going about your regular day, but it crept up in your mind when you were alone. Especially because they weren't really giving a lot of information about why he was doing it, why he was choosing his victims, how he was getting in the houses.
Right.
Because they didn't know. The information was so odd and few and far between. And I don't think it was anything on, against them on their part. But they just didn't have a lot for us. And, obviously we didn't know that there was more than one killer out there. So you just start seeing all of these news reports one on top of the other in different parts of the city and killed in different ways. I mean, Derek Todd Lee didn't have one method. And then Sean Vincent Gillis had completely different methods. And so you don't know what to make of it. And
right. So let's talk about
yeah.
that. Let's talk about that. But let's talk about the different serial killers, because you did send me a podcast from Generation Y about the Baton Rouge serial killer, and they just really focused on Derek Todd Lee.
Right.
So Derek Todd Lee is known as the Baton Rouge serial killer. That was his name, and he was a black guy, and he sort of went to people's homes and asked if he could use the phone. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think he's known as the Ghost of Baton Rouge.
Okay.
Because he was fairly undetectable. They found out that he was getting into the homes essentially through asking to use the phone. And they found this out from Diane Alexander, his survivor.
Right.
Asking to use the phone and gaining the trust that way. He was somewhat, I don't want to say good looking, but he was not menacing. Tall, light-skinned black guy. I think he worked in construction for a little while, and he participated in what they call following behavior, where he would not stalk the victims, but watch the victims, which is pretty obvious in Gina Wilson Green, Charlotte Murray Pace, and who else? Who else was it? Green, Boisfontaine, and Pace all lived within 5 houses of each other on Stanford Avenue. So clearly he was watching these girls, before he did things to them. So, yeah, he was gaining their trust by asking for something, knocking on their door and asking for the phone, or asking if he could, I don't know, if something was in their driveway, if, just something innocuous.
Right. And there was someone, I don't know if it was Diane Alexander, but someone had, he'd asked for the phone, they'd handed it through the door with the lock on it, locked the door, waited for him to use it, then he used it and he was like, here's your phone, and he pushed his way in and smashed her in the head with the phone. And I think that's Diane Alexander. And the reason why she survived is, and we're going to go into detail on each victim and what happened in the podcast, but for right now, we'll talk, in generalities. But the not the husband, the son came home and he heard a struggle, or he heard noises in the house, and he ran in and actually gave chase to Derek Todd Lee after him.
Yes. Yeah, he chased him out the back door, and he was able to give eyewitness testimony, and Diane Alexander is where the final sketch came from, because the first sketch was actually of a white man.
Yes. Yeah. So without Diane Alexander, we probably would have never caught him. Right.
I say we, like I did it.
So talk to me about, there's 2 other serial killers. There's Sean Vincent Gillis. There's Jeffrey Lee Guillory.
Yeah.
And so what's happening here? We don't know about these guys till long after all of these murders are done. Like, nobody's saying there's multiple serial killers while this is happening. Everybody thinks it's just Derek Todd Lee or one person.
Yeah. So Sean Vincent Gillis is pretty interesting. He grew up in Baton Rouge. He actually went to the same high school as some of the friends of mine that I was tailgating with. He starts in, we think he starts in 1994 with Ann Bryan, who lived in a retirement home that was across the street from his girlfriend's work, which was a gas station.
Okay.
And they lived together, but she worked nights. So he was out killing while she was at work.
Is this the guy that the mom left him the house, or was that, do you remember that part or no? There was one serial killer, and I thought maybe they had talked about Sean Vincent a little bit in this podcast, that he lived with the mom, and then the mom left and he was alone in the house, and then he got the girlfriend.
I'm not sure. It may be true. I'm not sure, but I know that she had no idea that he was doing what he was doing.
Let me just ask you this before I forget. Now, sorry, I'll interrupt you sometimes because I forget stuff. Okay. But did any of your friends at the tailgaters who went to high school with him or knew of him at the same high school, did they say anything about Sean Vincent Gillis? No, none of them said anything. Okay.
I don't think they would have cared.
Okay.
They don't.
So there was another guy, Jeffrey Lee Guillory, and he was also a light-skinned black guy, or is he like Middle Eastern or something? I can't tell from his picture.
He was black. Okay. I don't really know much about him, and I couldn't find very much about him. The victims that I could find were all Black.
Okay.
And I had never heard of him before, but it seems like he was just he was killing for opportunity, and because he liked it, but it just kind of solidifies the fear in Baton Rouge at the time, because he was active at the same time that the other two were active, and it was just this pandemonium.
Right. It's
like
really
nobody
hard.
was safe.
Yeah, no one was safe. But also, it's really hard for authorities to figure out what's going on because there's no pattern at all. And
Right.
I just did this podcast on Thursday about the FBI and how they approach serial killers, because not all serial murderers are psychopaths, and not all psychopaths are serial murderers, and
Right.
they have traits that are traits in common with each other, but they're not all the same. They're all different. They all have different ways of operating, but there are generalities, like they usually kill close to home. They usually don't cross state lines. They usually,
Right.
Pick their victims ahead of time and like you said, stalk them. What is the difference between stalk and watch for you? I don't understand that. What do you mean by that?
Stalking behavior, from the research that I did, and especially with Derek Todd Lee, is more like the victim knows they're being stalked. Following behavior is more peeping Tom, and Derek Todd Lee did have a history and was arrested a few times for peeping Tom.
Yep.
So following behavior, the victim doesn't know they're being followed. So that's the difference that I could find.
Okay.
But it's interesting that you said that, because I'm looking at, like, Sean Vincent Gillis kind of was all over the place. Hardy Schmidt, he just was driving down the road one night and hit her with his car. He just hit her with his car, put her in his trunk, and went and picked his girlfriend up from work. And she complained about the stench in the car and said, "You need to clean this car." And he did, and she never said anything else about it. So, and he dismembered some of his victims.
Yeah, he seemed much, well, not that slitting someone's throat is not bad, but dismembering people is like a different level of serial killer when you're cutting bodies apart.
He even killed, Johnny Mae Williams was a family friend, I guess is the best way to put it. He had known her for a really long time. They used to smoke pot together. He killed her. So all over the place. And Derek Todd Lee was all over the place. Charlotte and Murray Pace, they said, and that it's kind of horrible, they said there was blood from one end of the apartment to the other, and they found an iron. She was beaten with an iron. So these three combined that we know of none of them had one consistent way they were doing anything. So to sit and think about in that time, there's all of these things happening, and if you get creative, in your mind, there could have been 10 serial killers. We had no idea. So I think that's why we kind of just didn't sit on it. We were like, hey, live in the moment, because you don't know what's going to happen.
Right. And I'm going to ask you about how you felt after all of this was over. So 2005, 2004, whenever it was kind of over and people were in jail. Not that they were convicted or the court stuff had happened yet, but when it was kind of over, how you felt. But I also just want to mention that Derek Todd Lee had a very low IQ. It was so low, it was something like 60, that they almost couldn't take him to trial because they didn't know if he could stand trial because of his IQ. I mean, this was not a smart guy. It seems like he's avoiding police. He's eluding police by doing all these different kinds of murders with different people in different places. And and so is Sean Vincent. But they're just killing. They're just murderers. So my question before we get to the last question, and we can talk about other stuff too, but my question is how is this for you? Like, does this bother you talking about this true crime stuff? Just having someone here that I'm interviewing, I'm just curious because I'll help you answer, I guess, or I'll answer first. Nothing bothers me because I've been into the Dateline Unsolved Mysteries world for so many years and true crime and now podcasts that the only thing that bothers me is children. Like, it's not that it's not horrible that this is happening to women who are young, who are old, or whatever, mostly some men. But when it comes to children, it's really tough. That's why The Night Stalker was really tough for me to do a podcast about. But I'm just curious how you feel about the true crime stuff.
It doesn't really bother me, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing.
Do you want to figure it out? Like, what is the...
It's a puzzle.
Okay, it's a puzzle you want to figure out, maybe?
Yeah, it's something I think that I want to figure out of the why, what made you think that you needed to do this, what made you think you could get away with this, what made you think this was okay, kind of thing. But in most cases, right, you're never going to get that answer because their justification is never a good one.
Right.
But just the question of why people do what they do is a very interesting question to me, and to see it play out in different ways, especially like this, is interesting. It doesn't bother me to talk about this because, it's kind of over. I lived through it. But clearly we have plenty of people who didn't. And some of the people who aren't on this list, won't have justice because nobody ever owned up to it.
Right.
What I did want to make sure that we do talk about is why Derek Todd Lee was able to evade the police. And one of the reasons why is because, the police put out a sketch of essentially a white man and said they were looking for a white man in a white truck. And it was because they had a witness or some kind of tip that they saw a white man in a white truck with a white woman slumped over in the passenger seat a couple of days before they found one of the bodies off the Whiskey Bay Bridge. So that's what we were looking for. And that's what we, thought was the guy. So if you're looking for, a white man in a white truck, you're not going to start asking black men for their DNA or, questioning black men when they're not where they're supposed to be.
Right. And they were actually stopping white men in white trucks,
men and
taking their DNA, and someone even had a bumper sticker saying,
a bumper sticker made that said, I'm not the serial killer. But once they started to connect the DNA, and once they got Diane Alexander's eyewitness testimony, then they went back and started to look at different cases, and they looked at Connie Warner and Randy Meeber and Zachary. And the Zachary police said, hey, we've got this guy who, kind of sounds like our guy. He got arrested for something else, and his DNA matched. And right before that, he had packed everything up and moved to Atlanta. And they came and got him and took him off to jail. So unfortunately, he passed away in 2016. But, a lot of these people finally got some justice. I know I know Pam Kennemore's mom had a lot of things she had to say about what was going on. But there are some, some missteps that happened, but they finally got him. Sean Vincent Gillis, his tire tracks were the way that they got him. And his poor girlfriend, I honestly don't think she knew anything at all.
Right.
You see those things on Dateline and you're like, did she really know? She did not know. She did not know. But yeah, I mean.
So let me ask you this, because we throw out these questions in this Clubhouse group that I do, and hopefully you'll be doing Saturday nights at 8 Eastern. It's called True Crime Discussion Group. But how do you feel about the police? Like, my dad was a cop. He's retired. I always wanted to be a detective. I ended up becoming like an artist and a video editor. I did different things, but I've always been obsessed with like detective work and solving crimes. It just feels like they are 2, 3, 4 weeks behind and nothing happens quickly. And I mean, if you're killing people, like, it just takes so long to catch up and get all, and you just have to have an overabundance of evidence, and you have to have the body and the gun and the knife and eyewitness. It's like, come on, like, obviously this guy did it. You know what I mean? And sometimes I've seen cases recently that are so frustrating, and I know you have, where the DA won't even bring it to trial because there's no body, or, if you hide the body or dispose of the body, you can most of the time get away with it. It's kind of crazy. Circumstantial evidence has gotten better because of the DNA and being able to connect people through phones and tracking them on the computers and stuff. But how do you feel about that? Is it frustrating for you?
So it's two sides of the same coin. So you want to make sure that the police are doing everything they can to get all of the evidence that, proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the right person did it, right? You don't want to put anybody who's innocent in jail. But you want to get justice for the victim. So, and a lot of, areas that are, especially areas that are smaller, don't have the size of the force that they need to really work on cases that are in depth and need, somebody working on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So a lot of times they are behind the 8 ball.
Right.
And a lot of politics comes into it, and they don't want to call in, the big guns, and so it's tough. It's hard. I don't want to say, I get frustrated. I feel like there are lots of things that we just don't know that go on behind the scenes, good and bad. Detectives that really, really want to solve the case that are just getting stymied at every turn.
Right.
And then, times when they just don't have the evidence that they need to prove what they feel like they need to prove. So, I would like to think that we have a justice system that puts away the wrong people when they do wrong. It doesn't always happen. And some people get away with murder. So right. It's just not fair either way,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I just gets frustrating sometimes because even the detectives want to take this case to court and people won't do it. And depending on what your state you're in, certain people in certain cases are going to go through, and depending who's judge and like you said, the politics are involved. So it's like,
absolutely,
you're sitting there saying, what is going on here? This should be an open and shut case here where they've got a body and they've got 3 witnesses. And somehow it doesn't even go to court. But we can get into that later on Clubhouse another time. But let's just wrap it up with, how did life go back to somewhat normal? Was it normal? Were you looking over your shoulder after all these guys were caught, or what was that like?
Yeah, so I remember when they caught Derek Todd Lee. I don't really remember when they caught Sean Vincent Gillis, to be honest. And I didn't even know that Jeffrey Lee Guillory was out there, so I don't remember that. And it was a sigh of relief for sure. We watched and were kind of like, all right, cool. And we just kind of went back to our regular lives.
And there was nothing in the back of your mind saying...
Well, no. I mean, I was definitely more aware of everything and more thinking, okay, were those his only victims? Were those the only girls that he did something to? Or for sure, was he the only one? Right. So then my mind starts spinning out thinking, okay, if he was going on and then this other guy was going on, like, how many were there, guys? Right. Like, so, yeah, I mean, then you start to have all kinds of crazy ideas in your head. But again, like, you have to live your life. So you go to work and by that time, I had my own house and it was a different thing for me. So I was working on my career and making sure that I was, following this path that I had set out for myself. I wasn't any more safe than I was when he was out. I was just as safe. But it did make me want to leave Baton Rouge because of that. One factor that everybody has to remember, though, is 2005, Katrina hit. And the world changed for everybody in, New Orleans and Baton Rouge and the surrounding cities. So Baton Rouge didn't have the damage that New Orleans had, but we had an influx of people, and that really broke our infrastructure. Right. So by the time that, Derek Todd Lee that story was done, then it was, Katrina.
Then it was Katrina. Oh my God. So many different things. So many different things.
That was a different story. So
more stress, more craziness.
Yeah. So I didn't leave until 2012, and that was because my job moved me.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, let's just say that this was amazing, Jennifer, to talk to you about this, because it really gives me, and I'm sure the listeners, like, incredible insights on what's it like, or what it is like to, be around during the time of a serial killer, which I've never experienced. I was in New York on 9/11, and that changed me in certain ways. But, things, and you had Katrina, and I probably had something else. But life is just a bunch of crazy stuff. But I just feel like these murders are just so senseless. And every single murder takes like 1,000 victims, because it's not only the victim, it's their families and their friends and their coworkers. And it just sort of devastates everyone for years, and some people can't get over it. I mean, there's some mothers and fathers are never the same again. So I just wish people would stop. These mass shootings are back again after the pandemic. Just please, everybody, stop the killing. But it's been great to talk to you, and I'm sure I will talk to you on Clubhouse again. And do you have any final thoughts for the listeners that you want to say?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly. It's kind of like an atom bomb, right?
Yeah.
It just takes out everything around it. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was really great. And thank you so much for coming on and talking, but also the timeline was incredible to look at and see the detail that you put into it. So thanks so much, and we'll talk again soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for listening, guys. See you next week in the next chilling episode of True Crime Freaks, you freaks. Thanks so much. Sean signing off. Hey, everybody. Welcome to True Crime Freaks, my new podcast. I want to tell you about the different ways you can support this podcast. One is you can go to my other podcast, Lights, Camera, Pro, where I interview TV and film professionals about their careers. And I also do movie reviews and TV show reviews. You can check out one of my online courses. I've got an Adobe Premiere Basics course and a Secrets of How to Start a Podcast course. Those are at thinkific.com. Just search them when you go there. We also have a merch store. Just search the podcast at teespring.com and check out our hoodies, t-shirts, and mugs. I also have a children's book called Feldman Runs Away, which is on amazon.com. You can always support the podcast by going to Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen, subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast does have graphic content. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to Joseph McDade for the music. I will see you next time in the next chilling story on True Crime Freaks. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a great day. I'm Sean Ventura. Take care.